But just imagine if someone like flashes into a, like goes for a crazy play, completely face plants. The commentator's like, "Yeah, we're checking in with Brox right now. Hey, buddy."
What the f?
What up, guys, and welcome back to Recall, a bi-weekly global League of Legends podcast all about the competitive scene. I am still your host, Frosk, and I'm still joined by the lovely Broxah and Medic. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. Happy to be here as always. What about you, Mr. Medic? Are we going to see the cats today?
Yeah, where's
maybe.
the cats?
Well, they're both sleeping over there. I could put the camera in that direction, but I feel that my room is too messy to do such things. Maybe they'll show up at some point. They're both snuggled
like
up. So.
The classic streamer where it's like the one section of the room
This
is
area
clean.
kind of tidy. The rest of it is boxes and.
But imagine if you cleaned it and we had a cat cam. That's how you get views on YouTube. I'm pretty sure.
That's true. We should do that. We should both do that. You have a cat as well, don't you, Frost?
I just got a cat. Her name is Billy the cat after Billy the kid, because when you hold her up, it looks like she's wearing chaps on her legs. So she's very cute, but super mischievous. I don't know if your cats are also really big troublemakers.
Mika is. Mika will cause a lot of mischief, whereas Kiki just likes sleeping. So
I need a Kiki. Okay. Yeah. Enough about cats. They are adorable, but we are ramping up into playoffs all over the world. So we're going to start with LCS Playoff Predictions. Guys, I think it's the final week of LCS that we're going into. It's a super week, so there's no way for TL to go 1-1, even though they just had their last 2-0 week. They have to definitively either go positive or negative. Are we feeling good? I know it was supposed to, we had great matchups last week, declare like who was the best in LCS. People were still voting for EG, and then boom, 100 Thieves comes in and makes clean work of them, and then boom, TL has a 2-0 week, and then boom, CLG is still doing really well. And now it feels very confusing who is the best team in the LCS.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Sorry, I was waiting for Mads to jump in, but I think if you were like just trying to look at it as objectively as possible, 100 Thieves are on current form. They seem like the best team. Now, whether that actually translates to they would beat all of the other top teams on any given day is debatable, but they're on a 7-win streak. They look pretty unstoppable. They just beat C9. Yeah, they beat Golden Guardians alongside them, but they look pretty strong. Alongside them, though, Team Liquid are really leveling up in my eyes. I think the last week, as you say, they tend to go 1-1, but their 2-0 performance was really strong, especially their win against EG. I think there were some extra things to talk about in that win, but we'll get to those later in the show. But they enacted a game plan really well, and the ability to play around Bwipo was really encouraging for me with TL. And I'm sure Broxah will, extol their virtues, sing their praises as well over the next couple of minutes.
I know, Broxah, this is like the best episode for you, because now you can really talk up TL without lying.
True. This is where I make Steve give me a very nice raise. So Steve, you better be sitting out there. But no, on a serious note, I've obviously been happy to see Team Liquid do so well, and I think they have been stepping it up, and they're finally looking like the team we all expected to see coming into the year. And I feel like TL, 100 Thieves, and EG for me are the clear top 3 currently. Each of them having like good and bad days, but overall I think they're showing the most dominance and consistency. And then CLG is interesting because CLG is a team that started out really well in summer, for the first time in a few years probably, and I didn't expect them to continue that success, but so far they've actually been looking really solid. And I would say that outside of the top 3, they are probably my dark horse right now to secure a world spot. Maybe with a Cloud9 in there as well, but super interesting LCS split where I feel like so many things could happen, and it's really hard to predict who's actually going to make it to Worlds in the end.
Yeah, kind of going for Worlds prediction. So not necessarily the 3 teams, although Broxah just gave us, and I'm assuming, Medic, that you're in the same vein of 100 Thieves, Evil Geniuses, and TL going to Worlds. what team, and it doesn't even have to be one of those three, what team from the LCS do you guys think would perform the best at Worlds? And I always think this is really interesting because a lot of people would immediately grab like the best team in the league, but I think it's always worth those discussions, kind of like when LEC sent Rogue. Like Rogue were clearly never the best team in the LEC, but people felt very confident that they would do well at Worlds just because of the nature of their play style. And I'm wondering if there's a team like that in the LCS that just has like a really good play style for the international stage.
Now it's my time to shine.
Oh, here we go. Here we
If
go.
you say TL.
Of course I do. So if we look at TL, again, we have Core JJ, who's considered not only the best support in North America, but one of the best supports in the world. Already has won Worlds in the support role, and I played alongside him, seeing him teach tactical, kind of mentor him and turn him into a really solid AD carry. And now the main problem between Core and Hans has seemed like the synergy has been lacking a little bit, which is going to be really key on the world stage, but it's slowly starting to look better in the bot lane, and I think a playmaker in Core alongside an aggressive AD carry in Hansama, who looked really good at Worlds last year for Rogue, which is part of why Team Liquid actually picked him up, I think could be really solid at Worlds. Bwibo has already done it well for Fnatic at Worlds in the past. He has an aggressive playstyle, which is something we don't see out of a lot of Western top laners. Top lane usually is a weak spot, but I think Bwibo in form can make a difference internationally. Santorin hasn't had the luckiest 2 Worlds runs the past 2 years, but he still has been one of the best LCS junglers for a very long time, and I think he's able to show enough consistency and stability in the jungle to compete with the best junglers. And then I think the one player that still needs to prove himself internationally is actually Bjergsen, who, while being probably the best LCS player of all time, has had so much domestic success, but TSM just always faltered internationally in the past, right? And I think now, with all these players around him, this could be Bjergsen's chance to finally break his curse and also break Team Liquid's curse, so they can finally make it out of groups. But I think the potential is there in every role. I think all players has what it takes. But obviously when you play against the best teams in the world, like, everything has to align, because otherwise you're not going to be able to compete with especially LCK and LPL. Will look very, very scary.
It's interesting because you're talking mostly about experience, and I know that when EG were sent to MSI, a lot of people were just very excited to kind of see, how will these new, young, explosive players, obviously still flanked by veterans that also had international experience, do on the international stage. And there was this excitement of kind of like fresh air heading to the stage. But when you're considering kind of the best team for LCS to represent on the international stage, you're really leaning into that, Bwipo having great international experience, Core JJ already having a world's title, and the strength there. Medic, are you kind of in the same boat with TL?
I think I wouldn't put my weight upon the fact they're as experienced. I think that obviously that does play a factor in how well they'll play at Worlds, and you can't exclude having experience. But I think the reason that I currently would look to TL as probably the best representative for NA at Worlds, or the team that I expect to do the best, is their early game is really strong. And I think the meta at the moment and the way that it's
Draven.
developed, on 12-14, 12-15, probably 12-15 as well, is a lot of bot side focus, a lot of dragon focus, getting early game leads and trying to take the game away from your opponents. And I think something that has been brought up in LEC this last week is a lot of our teams just play scaling and safe because that works in best of ones and is, it's easier to win if you just scale and you get to your, 2-item win cons. And teams in the LPL and LCK won't let you do that to the same degree. Or if you do try and play scaling against them, they'll play scaling but also win the lane against you. So I'm not saying TL can match LPL and LCK teams in terms of laning phase, but their laning phase looks the best to me out of any team in NA, and that's where I'm currently putting my stead in terms of how teams have to perform at Worlds and what I expect the meta to be like, unless we have a drastic shift going into the Worlds patch.
What's really interesting to me about TL, and you guys already kind of hit it on like Bwipo being in form, is that when we remember like Bwipo and Fnatic kind of in one of their better forms, Hilly actually had the lowest percentage of any support of being next to his ADC. He was the most roaming support, and his second highest position that he was around was actually the top laner. And it was usually when Bwipo and Hilly were on engage-oriented picks that Fnatic would like kind of steamroll through opponents, and you would just see them picking all these crazy fights. And now it feels like TL, even though that wasn't their game plan from the beginning of when they kind of brought on Bwipo, is starting to go towards that style of they have a really strong engaged support in core JJ, and now Bwipo being a very aggressive top laner and it seems to be more interactive with the map and with the team is finding success. And I had the privilege of listening to comms a very long time ago when Doublelift and Bjergsen were still on a team, and I can't remember what game it was, but it was at MSI in Europe. And I remember listening to Doublelift trying to get the team to do something, like basically being in comms, like, we need to do this, we need to do this, maybe we can do this. And Bjergsen, very calm, but was very much like, we can't do that, we can't do this, maybe we look for this, let's try this. And it just felt like this very interesting, like, tug of war about how the game wanted to be played. And I'm really curious if now TL have finally gotten on the same page, because I know that Bwipo is such a strong voice. If it's finally Bjergsen, like, letting go and just letting his team follow through and just kind of being that follow. Because whenever we think about Bjergsen, we usually think about him being a very strong leader, obviously has coaching experience, incredible veteran, incredible play. But in everything that I've heard from Bjergsen in game, I actually think he probably functions better as the guy who's supporting his team and kind of knocking down the dominoes once they start getting up and cleaning up, rather than someone who's pushing the dominoes down like a Caps or a Bwipo or a Doublelift. And Bjergsen, I'm wondering if you can speak to that from the player side, if that's true, false, how you feel about that common game.
Yeah, I feel like every player, or every team, sorry, needs a player who can be the stable rock of the team, who always brings consistency. And I think with the players in Team Liquid, those two players, in my mind, are always going to be Santorin and Bjergsen. I feel like when I see these two names going into the game, I pretty much know what to expect. I know they're going to be solid. They are probably not going to make any crazy highlight plays, but they're always going to do even or better than their opponent. And then you need someone who can make a difference, who can take these big risks and who can really turn the game around or flip it, if you want to put it that way. And I think that's something Bwipo has always been known for, like notorious aggression. And I know for a fact from playing with Core JJ that he is a very good playmaker as well. And when we played together back in 2020, I loved seeing him on the likes of Bard, Rakan, even Blitzcrank, just anything where, he could be proactive and make things happen. And our playstyle was a little bit different back then. It was the old school CL way of just playing mid-bot with Impact sitting top on a tank. But now that they're finally starting to utilize Bwipo as a carry, I think they're going to have a lot more threats. And I definitely think when you have a team with a lot of strong voices, it can be difficult to create a communication system that makes sense, just because everyone wants to be the leader, and at one point you need to find out who's the main guy, because you cannot end up in a scenario where someone makes a call and then someone else makes another call and then you start arguing about what to do. And back when I was in TL, we ended up having the system of me being the main voice in early game, and then in mid and late game, Core would be the main voice, and I would be like the secondary one. So let's say if we use the Doublelift Bjergsen's example, I could be like, I think we should do this and this, then Core is like, we're gonna do this, and then I need to shut my mouth. And that could be an example of how to do it. And I think once that dynamic is in place, you're gonna be fine. I also think usually players at this level, like everyone's gonna have a good understanding of what to do in the game, but usually you're gonna see the jungle, the support, maybe sometimes the mid laner having the better overview, just because of the way that the roles function and because of how inclined we in certain roles are to play for Vision in certain areas and whatnot.
Kind of moving the conversation along, there was some big news this week, and I think it kind of fits in this idea of players overseeing everything, having like a good idea, and moving into coaching roles. Huni announced that he was retiring. I thought it was kind of good and bad. So I applaud TSM for finally having transparency and really sticking the landing there on how they've been calming to their community. I think it is quite sad that it was blundered from the beginning and that Huni didn't get the, I guess, like the send off in some of his final games playing, not knowing that that was going to be Huni's final appearance is sad for how much of a legend he is. Just to kind of go through some of the stats, Huni has won a title in LCK, LEC, but he never won the LCS title. Even after Immortals had that crazy good season, they weren't able to complete it and lift it. So almost had a triple crown. He has competed in 3 different leagues, obviously. One of the greatest top laners that this scene has ever seen. And I think just like now a pretty established legend moving into a coaching position for TSM currently. MSI trophy, multiple Worlds appearances, the famous Huni reign over fanatic that the European fans love. And I think it's just kind of sad. It's always sad when big famous players kind of step away from the spotlight, and I would have loved to have celebrated Huni's final games a bit more.
I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the most sad part for me is that he actually is retiring due to an injury, and that just puts a lot of thoughts in my head, because obviously an injury getting to the point where he feels like he has to retire means it must have been something serious, and it's coming out now, but it could be that this has actually been affecting him throughout this year, maybe throughout last year, like who knows. And he's had some really dominant runs in all the 3 leagues he's played in, and maybe if he didn't, have this injury to deal with, he would still be destroying people in the LCS right now. But I've played with players with like wrist problems or back problems or whatever, and truth is that it's just going to affect you in all sorts of different ways that are out of your control, and that feels really sad. But ultimately, despite the sad send-off, he definitely has been someone that many of us players have looked up to.
I think that's the thing as well. Like in recent years, there's been a lot of talk about him being a paycheck stealer and him not playing to like his potential, etc. in NA, and I just really want to quash that. Like this guy was one of the best top laners ever. Like he's been absolutely exceptional. One of the only players ever to play in 3 different regions and compete at the top in 3 different regions. Obviously, that's like Faker didn't go to NA, so we don't know how good Faker would have been in NA, but it's still an incredible achievement. Getting to a Worlds final, only losing to Samsung Galaxy, winning an MSI trophy. He was even part of the Fnatic roster that was the first European roster that really gave European fans hope since like the start. The roster that went and took SKT to 5 games at MSI. He was a generational talent, and I think a lot of people look at his last 3 years and say, well, he struggled. But if you look at Faker's last 5 years, he hasn't won a title either. So you're not saying Faker's bad because he hasn't won anything recently. In the same way, like Huni is an exceptional player, and as Broxah says, like it's very sad to see him go because of an injury. I think he has talked about it in the past, saying that his wrists have been a bit difficult for a few years, and is one of those things that like when they get to a certain point, there's only so much you can do to stop that from progressing, especially if you're playing all the time, if you're getting repetitive strain injuries. So
I would personally love to see Huni step into a broadcast role. I know he's already
yeah,
appeared
his
on the
cast
LCS.
was amazing. It was so much fun to listen to.
But I'm unsure if he'll stay in a coaching role. I know that as I think one of the biggest issues right now is it's really hard, especially in NA where streaming is so prominent. And I think that players really get burnt out. Like you always compare CS:GO to League of Legends and how CS:GO pros can be so much older, but the retirement age for League players seems much lower. And the fact of the matter is that League of Legends changes a lot more than any other game, and I just think after grinding it for so long, you see it in players' careers. I think the burnout hits. We've seen players talk about it, but Perks are pretty vocal about talking about it. That sometimes you have to hit the pause button and just like let yourself relax, and then sometimes they can focus back in and reach more highs like Perks did, and sometimes you really just need to back up. But I would love to see more players retiring, moving into coaching positions, because I think inherently that will just make the region stronger as a whole. So if Huni stays in a coach position, I'm sure they'd be really lucky to have him right now. TSM using him, of course. But Huni on broadcast, I think is such a great personality, and it's so rare. Broxah, you have already passed the test of being a great broadcast personality, but I'll let you know in a little secret. We have a list of players that are good on broadcast and players that are bad on broadcast.
I mean, I still remember Huni's first 1-2 splits on Fnatic where he wasn't even comfortable speaking English, but he was just so entertaining, making all sorts of like crazy, noises and sounds and dances, and he's always been a perfect, personality who could shine, not only in game, but in a team setting, in interviews, just whenever you see the guy, you expect it to laugh, and that's you're saying that's something very great to have on a broadcast.
I love Huni, and from all of us at Recall, we wish you nothing but the best. Speaking of the broadcast, right now the LCS is doing something great. I think they have a great product right now, definitely on the up and up, where they're using comms in the broadcast. So if you guys, for whatever reason, haven't watched the LCS, not talking to you, talking to the audience. If you guys haven't watched the LCS, you should watch it. They do this thing, they play the game, the casters are doing, the replay runs in, and the casters will clue you in that you get to listen to the comms, and then you watch the replay with the players talking, which, just think from a technical perspective, you gotta have someone listening to the comms and make sure that, A, no secrets are being leaked, B, no egregious curse words are being used, and you have to turn that around in a very tight time frame. It's already hard enough to find good replays and make sure that you're in them and out of them without missing anything really crucial. So from a broadcast perspective, and technically speaking, that is hard to do, and I really commend the LCS doing it. Yes, I know that the LPL and the LCK also do it. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's great. It's something we've been pushing for in the LEC for a long time, and it's difficult to get it wrangled. You have teams saying they don't want secrets to be leaked. It's all the technical stuff behind it as well, but it just adds so much extra to the game. The only issue I ever find is fans are dumb sometimes, and like everyone is dumb sometimes, like obviously. But I have seen a few tweets being like, "I can't believe this guy said this," or "I can't believe this guy said this," and it's like, come on. If you were on a football pitch listening into the players, they would say much worse than this. There've been times that like cricketers get mic'd up when they're playing cricket, and you just
love
hear
that.
it's great. I love it. They have it like a conversation. It's like a live interview during the game.
I wish. I've always said that would be peak. They'll never do it, but
No, of course not.
the
Imagine that.
commentators
Yeah,
can
Bjergsen,
literally
you're
ping
laning versus
into-
Faker right now. How do you feel about this matchup, Bjergsen? Yeah. Oh no, he's diving me. Oh, Benki's coming.
But just imagine if someone like flashes into goes for a crazy play, completely face plants. The commentator's like, "Yeah, we're checking in with Perks right now. Hey, buddy."
What the
That sounds great, actually. That's
It would be
amazing.
so good.
I'd love just doing it passive aggressively as well. Just be like, so, Broxah, I noticed that you miss-smited there, and now you've lost 2 camps, and you're on your rating leaks. Was this in the plan? Was this part of your strategy for this game?
Yeah, I think in that case I'm gonna make sure I block any mid-game medic interviews and so I can be safe.
You just give the players a button where they can flip a switch that says no or yes. They do a crazy play, immediately that switch hits.
Like, yes.
Now, I think it would be something great to Riot All-Star events. This is what they're made for. Add something unique to All-Star events. You have a show match. Allow the casters to ping in live to talk to the players. Riot has again announced and released another top 5 supports of all time. They formerly did their top laners of all time, Impact 1 number 1. If you guys want to go check that out, it's over on LoL Esports. Same thing with the top 5 supports of all time. And on the broadcast, there was actually a really interesting conversation. There were debates about Core JJ being number 1. So the list is Elimination, Biofrost, Vulcan, Afromoo, and Core JJ at number 1. And Emily and Jat on the broadcast both voted for Afromoo. Now, Dash did confirm that it came down like to the wire on Core JJ getting the top, but just as a Core JJ defender, nothing against Afromoo. I don't think that there's any player in this is a hot take. I don't think there's any player in the LCS in their position that has ever been top 5 in the world other than Core JJ. And that's not to say that the people would be like, what about Bjergsen? What about Doublelift? And it's not to say that Doublelift and Bjergsen are bad players by any means. Unfortunately, they're 80 carries and mid laners. That position is stacked globally. You have to get through like 20 LPL and LCK mid laners and 80 carries that could just vie for that position. And yeah, maybe you could make an argument that they scrape into that list, but I don't think I'm ever really confident in being like Doublelift and Bjergsen are definitely top 5 in the world. With Core JJ, very confident to say that.
I can see that. I think then the definition of what is a top 5 LCS best support is where I'd challenge, right? Because I think Core JJ is the best player of those 5. Whether he is a top, like whether he's the best in terms of LCS supports of all time, because he did a bunch before he came to the LCS, right? He was an established player. He won Worlds, right? And
but I think he's been in his best in the LCS as a support.
Do you think he has done more in the LCS than Afromoo has done? I think Afromoo has been there for longer, has a similar amount of titles and a similar amount of MVPs. And yes, Core JJ, I expect to overtake Afromoo. But right now, unless, well, TL haven't won the split yet. If TL win this split, sure, give it to Core JJ now. But right now, I think Afromoo just pips Core JJ for me.
So I think one split.
One more split.
In my opinion, I feel like it depends on, like you said, like how you define the top 5 best supports. Because I think for most people, when they think of LCS supports, you know, people that have been around for a long time, have represented the region, Core JJ wouldn't really be the first one to come to my mind, and maybe not even Vulcan, because in my mind Vulcan is also a relatively new guy. So I'm thinking the likes of Afromoo, Elimination, Biofrost. But then when it comes to the peak of these players and how well they can actually perform at their best, Core JJ and Vulcan are suddenly in a completely different position where you have to rank them amongst the very top, right? And to be fair, Core has already played in the LCS for a lot of years, but Afromoo has just been around since the very beginning, right? So I can definitely see why it's such a close battle, because they've both done a lot for the region in a lot of different ways. And I would say if we consider like the duration, the length of time that these guys have played in the league, I would give it to Afromoo. But if we look at how great these guys are at their peak and how well they can, you know, they have been able to compete internationally, I would give it to Core.
I think that's always the hardest part is the metric at which people are weighing, and you have to take into all of these accounts, and everyone will have like a different opinion, and that's why these lists will slightly change. That said, I know that there was also some discussion on the desk talking about Xpecial, who obviously didn't make the list, but was a worthy contender of being announced there. Is there any other supports that you think are missing from the list?
I think Xpecial is an honorable mention, in my opinion. I think he had a really good time at the start of the LCS. Like, won 2 LCSs in a row, I think. Went to Worlds, made quarterfinals. Was quarterfinals, I think, for Xpecial. Yeah.
It's just crazy that you say Xpecial to like a modern day League of Legends watcher.
And no one knows who he is.
And they're like,
right? That's the reason we need a Hall of Fame. I don't understand why we don't have a Hall of Fame in League yet.
An iconic skin. I keep pitching this. Make an iconic skin line. You have the problem is like who owns the rights to what,
exactly,
which is why we'll never do it. But imagine
it's the same
if
reason we don't
Dyrus,
do voice crack.
A Dyrus singed skin, where he's
With a
running around with
pillow?
Mr. Pillow.
Oh,
A
so
faker,
good.
a faker LeBlanc skin, or a faker and Ryu Zed skin. Oh, where the shadow
Oh,
is Ryu and
that
the
would be
Zed is
really good.
faker.
Yeah. A double if Vayne skin.
That would be an Uzi Vayne skin.
I know, but it was the Victor Vayne joke. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I get, but
A
you could have
reckless Sivir skin. That'd be nice. Or Kennen or Trist, I guess.
or
Actually,
Tristana,
So many options.
a
who
Broxah
would
Lee
your
Sin
skin? Yeah,
skin.
Broxah Lee Sin.
It'd definitely be his Lee Sin.
Yeah, because
Broxah,
of
I
that
don't know if you
Gragas.
ever watched it, but after you had that crazy game against Invictus Gaming when you were on Fnatic and just like completely styled on them with Lee Sin, on the desk I was like, people will watch that game. Like young kids will watch that game and decide to become Lee Sid mains and go pro because of that performance. That's how good that was.
I remember it almost word for word, especially now that you're repeating it. I have watched that clip so many times.
He's like, I need to
Most
feel good.
most of the times it wasn't even just me wanting to boost my confidence. It was people showing it to me for all sorts of content purposes or interviews or whatever it may be. And yeah, your amazing statement on the desk, I definitely remember too.
Mate, that was peak. Who else would you have? Syndra Bjergsen skin? Would it be Syndra? He's also got a
Zillion.
crazy LeBlanc.
Syndra or Cillian, I guess.
Zillion out of
Yeah,
all
Zillion.
the champions he gets.
Or Bjergsen Ward skin.
Oh.
No, it's a TSM ward skin. It's
Okay,
just their
that's true.
junglers.
True.
Every time you set it down, oh no, if Faker had a Bengi ward skin.
Oh. Oh, goodness.
Sorry, we're off topic. These are great
That's
ideas,
fine.
right? We're just spitballing here. A Mad Life Thresh skin.
Yeah, obviously.
Mm. Okay. Moving over into the LEC. Enough with the LCS. Now to the real leagues, right, Medic?
No.
Right, Medic?
At least he's a mess, man. Like, I don't.
Yeah, I watched. What is happening over there?
I don't know. I took a break, you know. I took some time off, couldn't understand the league. Now I'm coming back and hoping that things make a bit more sense. So
I will say the standings are neck and neck. It is a very tight race. Do we have any big front? Like, is there any? Give me the 3 teams that you guys are the most confident in right now.
Ooh.
Mad
Lions. That's the easy one.
G2 and I mean G2. I think like they're 5-1 in the second half of the split. As much as like they don't perform like I expect G2 to perform, they still win. And then probably Rogue. Probably. Oh, actually, Vitality looked really good.
Yeah,
over the last couple of
finally.
weeks.
As Perk said, I think the tweet was, "We woke up."
Yeah. I think I'd probably still give it to Rogue, but Vitality are close. And then Misfits are close. And then Astralis are pretty close. Fnatic and Excel are kind of like near there as well. And SK, they could still make it.
We were so confident in Excel. Broxah,
Yeah,
are you confident in Excel?
that's the crazy part. That's what I was about to say. Like at the start of the split, watching from home, and whenever I was in Berlin on the analyst desk, everyone were like hyping up Excel. People were like, Markoon is gonna be the MVP. This guy's a god. They're so good. The Korean boot camp, and then it kind of reminds me of Misfits in spring, where they looked so good until they didn't anymore, and then it started going downhill, which is a little bit disappointing in a way, because I think Excel was such a great team, and now they're just not looking as hot anymore. But yeah, I agree with Medic's top 3. I also think Matt, G2 and Rogue. But I gotta admit, going into this upcoming weekend, the last weekend of regular split, my eyes are just gonna tunnel completely on Fnatic. Like I don't even care about anything else. If Fnatic doesn't make it to playoffs, then
I think it's game 1. I really think it's day 1, game 4, Fnatic versus Astralis. If they lose that, I do not see them making playoffs. Even though they mathematically can quite easily still make playoffs.
It's such an easy pitch, though. Like, if that was the day 1 game you wanted, because Fnatic do seem like a very emotional, momentum-based team, like, that is the perfect appetizer. That is, like, some mozzarella sticks right there. Like, you're just gonna dig in and enjoy it, and it's just gonna make whatever comes next that much more delicious. I agree with you, though. If they bite into that shit and it's frozen, they're donezo.
And it's been frozen for a lot of teams recently. Like Astralis beat Vitality, Astralis beat Rogue, Astralis. They lose to the bad teams and they beat all of the good teams somehow.
Really weird.
So like, yeah.
But where do you put Fnatic in that then? Are they a bad or a good team? I think they lose.
They're a bad team right now. As much as they've made 19 playoffs in 19 splits. Oh, actually, yeah, then I guess Fnatic win. But no, I honestly think Excel will probably squeak by and get that 6th place spot, and Astralis and Fnatic will just miss out because Excel have SK. Oh, actually, last game is Excel versus Astralis, so maybe that's what will decide it all.
So you think Excel
for Astralis?
No, BDS.
Right. It was one of those bottom teams. I couldn't remember.
Yeah, AOD coaches Astralis. I actually put him on my coaching staff of the split.
Yeah, Deficio always spoke really highly of AOD when he was analyst, and then he got promoted into the coaching position, obviously after Andre left, and had nothing but good things to say about him.
Yeah, I think that coaching staff and Misfits coaching staff are really high up. It's one of the few times you can actually see a coaching staff making a team greater than the sum of its parts in LEC. Often we have good teams that you kind of give them coaching staff of the split because, well, your team played really well, so you must have done something right. But here, Misfits made the change with Zanzara, and Astralis have just looked a lot better than they should, in all honesty. So.
Speaking of, also Misfits on the rise. Sorry, Broxah, you were about to say something?
I found it interesting that Medic went for the Excel angle, because I actually would say that right now, Astralis is my favorite going into the weekend and making it to playoffs, which is absolutely ridiculous to think about, but it really seems to be the case. Like, I don't really know what happened to the Astralis.
That is not good news for Fnatic.
No, definitely not. But I feel like at the start of the split, Astralis was great. I had so much hope for them. Then in the middle, I kind of lost all hope and faith. And then now they're back and they're just smashing everyone. And I don't know what's going on. But I think at this point, also from a mental point of view, Excel and Fnatic have everything to lose. There's going to be so much pressure on them. And whoever doesn't make it to playoffs is going to be absolutely devastated. Whereas Astralis, while obviously wanting to make it to Worlds, didn't come in with the same aspirations and goals. And them sneaking into playoffs at this point would be really huge. But I feel like sometimes being in that underdog position can give you so much comfort. And while the other two are stressing out like crazy, they can take it pretty relaxed and chill, and they're just gonna see how it goes. And I think that should give them a pretty decent advantage, on top of the fact that they have been so solid recently.
So SK are gonna make it, is what you're saying, because they're in like 9th place, one win behind everyone else. I mean, they can still make it. Like, yeah.
So kind of same question that we asked about the LCS, which was which of the teams, could be any team, do you think would perform best on the international stage? Now, I think it's more interesting for the LEC because obviously Mad Lions look like the most consistent kind of top tier team from the LEC. And they do have players like Humanoid, not Humanoid, whoa, former Mad Lions. They do have players that have done well on an international stage. So you have that kind of like same confidence there. But I feel like G2 always performs on the international stage outside of the vacation meme, but that was Perks as the mid laner, not Caps. I feel like Caps usually is very solid. So I'm curious if you guys would go for a kind of the easy, which is Mad Lions, is kind of like the best team right now in the LEC, or if it's a Fnatic or a G2 or even a Rogue that you think would just perform best on international stage.
I think I'd probably go for G2. Just like watching how they leveled up in spring playoffs into MSI, even though they then kind of fell off a little bit at MSI, and the trust that I have in Caps and Yankos to like understand the meta and read a meta, and that coaching staff as well, like Dylan Falco, when they're ahead of the meta and they've got a good read on it, they're very good at enacting plans and finding ways to beat opposition that perhaps are a step above them. My only concern for G2 would be Flacket and Targamas in the bot lane. I think they are the weak point of the team, and there are a lot of internationally very strong bot lanes. And as I said earlier, I think the meta is going to be quite bot lane focused when we get to Worlds. So that would be my only concern for them. It's definitely not Fnatic Frosk. I can tell you that one for free. It's probably not as trying to either.
Appease the Fnatic fans. I'm trying to take the Garen Yuumi out of their mind.
Have you heard of the
never going to get out of my mind, I can tell you that much.
Okay.
I think there's going to be a Fnatic truck soon alongside that T1 truck that's waiting outside LoL Park at the moment.
Do you think the Fnatic fans can drive trucks? Because I feel like they would just show up with the pitchforks.
I mean, that's true. Pitchforks and torches.
Broxah, are you with G2 or are you gonna say
I would
Broxah?
I would also say G2 for sure. And I think while the worries about Targamas and Flagget are definitely justified, it's worth pointing out that they just played at MSI, and I think for newer players coming in, having that international experience already is going to make a huge difference, because some of the nerves and worries they could have going into that tournament shouldn't really be there anymore. They know exactly what they're going into. They already played what could be considered a mini Worlds in MSI, and I think G2 should be able to level up once Worlds come around. And in my mind, one of the big things that have been hurting them, which could be wrong, it's just an assumption, is the fact that they played MSI. Because when you play that tournament and everyone else doesn't, you are grinding for so long, and you don't really get to have that long of a break. And we often see it coming into Summer Split, that the MSI representative, we've seen that it's the same in LPL, by the way, they just don't look as great going into it. And they need a bit of time to ramp up again, because they just have to slow down a little, sneak in a few more breaks so they avoid burnout. But then once Worlds come around, I think they're going to be back in full force.
No Vitalities?
I think Vitality is just like
they're turning on at the right moment.
They look better now for sure, but I just honestly have no clue what to expect from them. Like in my mind,
Is it fair to call Vitality the TL of LEC? Just in terms of money spent on names on the roster comparatively, on kind of like expectations versus execution. Not saying like they share the same playstyle, because obviously very different, but again, it's like superstar roster, very expensive probably. Definitely wasn't living up to it, but turning on at the right time. Has all of the experience that we just, when we were talking about LCS teams, you were like, TL, they've got this guy, this guy, this guy, they should do well on an international stage. Vitality, they've got so much international experience.
I can agree with that. I think in terms of like the money spent, they're definitely similar. I put more like, I'd say TL is more roguish in terms of playstyle, whereas Vitality kind of is a little bit more Cloud9-y in terms of playstyle.
Clown and 90?
Not Cloud9. Just trying to get all the NA fans mad at me.
I would actually
love it when you shit on their teams.
Like right now, expectations wise, I would actually compare them to CLG. I think in terms of budget and expectations going into the year, they're completely different. But I think CLG and Vitality to me are in the same boat, where going into playoffs, I have absolutely no idea what to expect from them, and there's a chance they just go ham and stomp people. Yeah, exactly. Maybe they just go ham and stomp people. Maybe they get 3-0'd in the first round, and we don't see more from them this year. I have no clue, because these teams seem, I don't know. I want to say random. They don't seem random in that sense. I don't know what's gonna happen, because it's just interesting teams to follow.
The dark horses. Now, moving away from our Western bias, get that here. Let's talk about the LCK playoffs. Now, if you guys haven't been following along, 2 teams have already locked position in LCS playoffs. It's Gen.G and T1 locking position into the semifinals on opposite sides of the bracket. So, everyone ready for that Gen.G T1 final?
That's gonna be good, right? It's gonna be a banger.
A banger. Is there any other team? Who's the dark horse here? Because I feel like everyone understands who the favorites are. If we think that Vitality and CLG are the dark horses, who's the dark horse in the LCK?
Probably Sandbox. I mean, they beat T1 today. It was a pretty convincing 2-0 as well from Live Sandbox. So I'd put them up there as my dark horse. I think you can't look past Damwon either, but they just don't look as strong as they have in the past. The question is like, if Showmaker and Noguri and everyone and Canyon finally like works out how to play League of Legends this year, they have the skill there to challenge. They just don't look like they're going to right now.
I want to say DRX, but similar to Damwon and even Sandbox, I don't know if they actually have what it takes to make it at the very end. but I think they've started looking better recently. I think they have players that can do really well at their peak. Piosik, Deft Barrel already have proven themselves plenty of time, and I think Kingen and Sika in the mid lane could also be very solid, but hard to say if anyone can actually take down Genji and T1, but I would probably say DIX as my personal dark horse.
What's interesting is that Sandbox, obviously, a lot of their losses against Damwon and Genji came at the very beginning of their split, whereas now their victory over T1 is obviously coming, right at the right moment. Whereas if you look at DRX, they've been pretty consistent in over the course of their season of losing to the teams kind of placed above them in the standings, losing to Sandbox, losing to Genji, losing to T1, but then being pretty confident and we'll kind of avoid that 2-1 against some of the bottom table teams, but pretty confident in establishing and like beating down the teams underneath them. So I think it's a pretty apt comparison of like the Sandbox that seems to have grown and is maybe turning it on, and maybe if they got another chance at some of the better teams later on, that they would be consistent. Whereas DRX seems like they've been the line, if you will. If you can't beat them, you're not a good team, and they're definitely going to beat the teams beneath them.
Yeah, I
Who's
expect
your-
that's fair.
DRX will get to like a quarterfinal or something, but they're not going to get any further than that.
Who's our favorite here? Is it Genji? Is it T1? I mean, obviously T1 right now, as of recording this, coming off of a loss against Sandbox.
I mean, I think if you're just looking at current form, Genji should be your favorites. It's always hard to look past T1 because it's T1 and they've won like 11 LCK titles, I think. But Genji just beat T1. Everyone is coming online. Ruler looks like one of the best AD carries in the world, probably the best AD carry in the world. Chovy is Chovy. Peanut's playing out of his mind. Lehens is like everyone on that team's playing really well. The only guy that you look at and you're like, maybe he's abusable is Doran, but even Doran was able to keep Zeus under wraps when they played against T1, right? So I think Genji should be favored.
How much better do you think Ruler is than Prince on Sandbox?
I guess, yeah.
Because Prince is like
Prince is really good as well.
He's the main thing that makes me think Sandbox might have a chance of making it. Like, this guy is actually pretty next level.
Do you think the changes to champions like Sivir help boost that out? Just like the current meta state of like Kalista strong, Sivir strong, Draven strong, that you actually have these AD carries, Twitch is strong, that if you are in ADC position that you can hard carry a team?
I think the meta has kind of shifted back towards that. Yeah, I feel like the current AD carry meta reminds me more of the meta as we saw in like 2017, 18 maybe, where it was, well, maybe not 18, more like 17 with the Ardent meta, where it was all about getting the Ardent and setting up your AD carry for success in team fights. And now it's starting to remind me of that, because we're seeing a lot of strong scaling hyper carries that can really take over in mid and late game. And I think in solo queue in particular, those hyper carries often don't get to come online, but in a competitive setting, these good teams can really make the most of them and play so well around them in team fights that the likes of Ruler and Prince just look absolutely nuts.
Moving over into the LPL playoff predictions. As of recording this, OMG have just locked playoffs as well. EDG and Weibo are the only teams that have locked position in playoffs. So while there are a bunch of teams that have also locked in playoffs, it's kind of anyone's guess where seeding will work out. And if the audience is unfamiliar with the King of the Hill style gauntlet that the LPL playoffs are, seeding really matters because it can make your life infinitely easier in this bracket, and it is a very tough race. So currently top of the standings is JDG, where felt like everyone was ready to just say Victory 5, have at it. I believe the LPL caster said that Victory 5 is probably going to be the world's champion right now. They're currently sitting in 4th, tied with RNG. So sliding down a little bit as kind of top esports, RNG and JDG all turned on, ramped up, found their synergy, found what was working for them, and have continued to kind of blow past everyone. I think JDG and top esports in particular have kind of been the most, not improved, but you knew it was there, and now you're finally getting to see it, which is very confident.
Yeah, top won 13 series in a row, which is pretty absurd when you think about it. Obviously they were just brought down by V5, and I think V5 subbing out of Karsa and the addition of XLB has definitely changed that team for the better. Overall, I'd take JDG as my presumptive favorites, but it's so close. It's like trying to call the LEC at the moment. Like all these teams on any day could be any of these other teams. It would be like the top 4 are my 4 challengers, and the 4 teams I expect we'll see at Worlds. But any one of RNG, JDG, V5, and top could take it, in my opinion.
I would agree with that. I think it's been really interesting to me seeing how RNG has started ramping up throughout the split, because at the start I didn't feel like they looked that convincing, but now they're looking a lot better, and I think it's fair to compare them to the likes of G2 in the LEC, where they come back from MSI, they just needed some time to, you know, gel again and to start actually looking solid, and I feel like RNG is in a state now where they could compete with the other top teams, but I think LPL has almost always been so hard to predict going into playoffs, at least in my personal opinion, because there's so many good teams that play at such a ridiculously high level, and I think LPL seems also perhaps a little more emotionally driven than in the LCK, from what I feel like I've seen. It's a lot about momentum, so if one of these crazy good teams, you know, actually get a good start in the best of 5, there's a chance they just like absolutely steamroll the opponent. Not that that's necessarily a given, because we are seeing game 5s over there here, you know, sometimes too, but yeah, really hard to predict so many good teams.
I feel like I'm really excited to see JDG on top. They've been such a strong team for so long, but they've kind of always been the rogue of the LPL, where it's like, you know, they're really good, but they just never quite had enough to finally to reach the very top of it. And while I am very excited to see them all turn on and all kind of rise to the potential that we always knew was there, I still feel that when it comes time for that 6th gear to be found, that Victory 5 is just going to turn it back on. I know that you just talked about kind of emotional players, Karsa, and finding that momentum, or not Karsa, Broxah. I was going to say, I know that Karsa is a very emotional player, so I think maybe the substitution there, trying to sort some of that stuff out and kind of finding that new momentum for Victory 5. But I'd love to see Karsa come back, because I don't think there's any stronger 2v2 mid jungle than when Karsa and Rookie are playing on peak form. But right now, I've got top esports and Victory 5 as kind of like my two front runners, despite the fact that JDG are looking really good. I hope JDG lifts it. Big JDG fan, big Yagao fan. Get it, toothpaste, but I'm really scared for them. They're always right there, and then it comes time for playoffs. You're like, best of 5s. Ah! So,
Yeah.
moving on, it's like it's like a KT Rolster fan. I feel myself breaking out in hives anytime I see JD. I'm like, yes, this is the year. Never works. Tower damage bug is what we're supposed to be talking about. For those unaware, there currently is a bug in the game. It's all over Reddit, so you're probably aware, where towers are not doing enough damage in repeat shots. So as you tank more tower shots, the damage is supposed to increase over time, and it's currently not doing that. And we wanted to open up the discussion about how this impacts competitive integrity, and kind of the, I'm going to say, very nuanced conversation around it. I know Reddit is very black and white sometimes. Fans can be very black and white sometimes, but I feel like there is kind of a both sides of this argument. If Medic, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah. Basically, my main concern with playing games on this patch, and then we will assume in retrospect finding out that the bug existed, is how competitively what was the competitive integrity there, you know? Because if I am on the losing side of that, I say, well, this guy tower dived me, and you can't prove that he wouldn't have died in this situation. You could do the maths, but maybe the play would have played out differently. And so I think the question I would ask is, should we replay an entire week's worth of League of Legends games? And I'm not saying that is like maybe we have to deal in hypotheticals because from a business side of things, it's difficult and you can't, blow up the whole studio again and get all the casters in and do all of these and it delays things, etc. Right? But hypothetically, I think we should. I think that when you have something that affects the game this much, if you had, say, in football, a really waterlogged pitch and the teams played on it and they were like, hey guys, we want to complain about the quality of this pitch. It wasn't up to the standard we expect a pitch to be, or we expect Summoner's Rift to be. You would postpone the match and you'd replay it, right? And obviously the bug either was noticed and was told to referees, or wasn't noticed and we've only noticed it in retrospect. But I think it has enough of an impact on a game of League of Legends to say those matches should be replayed, because it wasn't the fair playing field. Everyone didn't expect things to work the way that things didn't work the way everyone expects them to work in that series or in those games. And I like just a few examples. I watched Bwipo survive with 100 HP against EG a couple of times when he dive topped. He would have died if he tanked that many tower shots. And you could say, well, he just wouldn't tank as many. So maybe he wouldn't, but maybe they wouldn't get the kill if he backed away. And it's happened all over the world. So I think it's really interesting. If I were a team that misses out on playoffs by one win and I lost a game in that week, I'd be like, hey guys, what is this? Like, you can't give me a patch that is not what you promised me, right? It's
then they go back,
I guess, right?
And scrub the footage, and they realize that team lost without ever being towered over.
I mean, maybe, right? Maybe.
Broxah, as a former pro player, would you want it replayed?
I feel like it's hard to say because
it's a hard question.
It's one of those things where it depends on how significant the bug was. I have been in a lot of situations as a player where some sort of bug happened and we ended up chrono breaking the game because it was unfair. Something happened that wasn't right. And in Medic's example with Bwipo diving people in scenarios where he wouldn't be able to kill them otherwise and where maybe he would have died. If this bug had been known at the time, it could be a reason for teams to just pause the game and either try to force a chrono break or a remake entirely. Now, it's something that has come out a little bit later, and assuming the teams weren't informed about it, it's tricky, right? Because you could say maybe similar to MSI, where some of the games were replayed because there were ping problems. Maybe this could be the same scenario. But I think it's most likely going to be one of those cases where people just have to accept that, things weren't entirely fair. There was a little sneaky bug out of nowhere, and they just have to accept for themselves that if they had done better overall and in the other weeks, then, this one weekend wouldn't have mattered. But it's worth noting that the bug is actually pretty significant, because after the first two shots, the damage only increases up to 40% once, instead of going all the way up to 120%. And
it's a 200%, like it would increase by 200% more than it's currently increasing, right? Which is a huge damage increase.
Yeah, not too long ago, the turret damage was buffed, and I remember when that patch came out, I was trying to dive people, and I felt like the turret was literally one-shotting me because the damage was crazy. And now all of a sudden, while that patch has rolled out and turrets were dealing more damage, it feels like we were kind of thrown into the past without knowing it, and that can definitely be considered a problem.
Do you think the primary issue isn't necessarily the quality of the bug, although that obviously does play a factor when we look at, missing 200% damage? But it's the fact that the teams on an even playing field didn't know or didn't have the information. Like, would you be asking for a replay? Like, let's say every team knows that the tower damage is bugged ahead of time. And
but then I think it's totally different, right? We're assuming they don't know, but if every team knows and they've agreed to play, then it's like, well, you've agreed to play on this. Like, it's an inform bug. There are plenty of inform bugs.
Yeah,
in League of Legends, tons
that's
of them.
what I'm saying. That's where the issue is not necessarily the severity of the bug. But what if every team knows, and then they specifically put together like a roaming mid laner and a diving bot lane, and suddenly they're just dive. That's the strategy. We're diving towers because we know it's easy.
I think it's happening. With it being brought up this week, with teams prepping for playoffs this weekend, with no official news on a bug fix, I really think teams for this week of LCS and LEC will be preparing compositions that dive a lot more. And maybe they'll say, "Oh, we just want to stick to what we know." But I really wouldn't be surprised if teams go more aggressive in the early game because they're like, "We're not going to take as much damage as we would in the past."
Is it that easy to kind of change gears, Broxah, or do you think that it's more likely that teams will just say, okay, if the situation or opportunity presents itself, we know that we can dive easier, but otherwise we're playing our game?
I think if you're a proactive team, and especially a team who has the back against the wall going into the last week, you are going to be more inclined to just lock in Nautilus or whatever, Leona, something
by Kalista bot lane.
Just something super strong that can just like dive the opponents with very little counterplay, right? Something where if you go for that dive and it works, as long as you play clean for the rest of the game is over. And
every Twitch Lulu's like, oh god, at level 4.
Exactly, because we've seen a lot of scaling in the bot lane, the split, and that's gonna change now. Even top lane. Jungle picks could change, top lane picks can change, because before diving it wasn't impossible, but you had to be really careful about how you approached it. There was a much higher chance of something going wrong, whereas now, as long as you have the right champions, it's actually pretty straightforward. So there could be a slight meta change. It is a possibility.
Then let's try to focus this down and again get the questions even harder, because I'm going to be, just for clarity, these are impossible questions to answer. Everyone's going to have a different answer and a different opinion on where they drop down on this one. What is the right runway time of knowing about bugs? Because there's the Hexflash bug in the LCK that everyone knew about, but perhaps they had been practicing something specifically with Hexflash, and then right before the matches, they're told that it is no longer able to be used, and suddenly you have to completely change maybe a pick that you were really focused on, or a set play that you had been really focused on with this specific summoner spell. Like, is it a day out? Is it a week out?
I mean, I think it depends on the severity of the bug, right? Because the Hexflash bug in the LCK was bringing people back to life without their deaths counting, and like that is like that breaks the game, right? So I would say that sort of bug, yes, it sucks for any team that has been practicing around Hexflash, but you just ban it. In the same way, if there's a champion that breaks the game, or that can like stop enemies from being able to auto attack or something like that, like you just ban it. Samira had a thing with GA where if she ulted with GA, she would still be ulting if she died, right? So she'd just be spinning while she was dead.
But can you imagine a game mode where, like, let's say Riot took the complete opposite stance. So they're like, okay, this bug will bring you back from death, but we're going to allow you guys to play it because you know it exists. It's kind of like, we know everyone uses steroids in the Olympics, but like no one will admit it. Yeah, it's like, what if we just ran the Olympics with everyone on steroids and just said, you know what? Have at it. We're just going to see who's going to be the most
complete crazy mode.
It would be hilarious.
Everyone's running Hexflash.
Can you remember when there was an old school Karthus bug and Singed bug where you could overload your mastery tree? So this is like really old school. And you could put tons of points into the one that reduced the cooldown of your summoner spells. So your flash would be on permanently off cooldown. So you could just flash all the way around the map with Singed and then flip people back all the way into your base. That's the Earth I want to see. Like that would be a great game mode.
Where's our competitive Earth?
I do want to say, for the Hexflash bug in particular, imagine if you're someone like Sansara, who's been grinding Poppy. Like, when I think of Sansara at this point, I just think of Poppy. Like, that's actually a hard nerf to Misfits. Hexflash not being available. Also players who have a lot of playmaking supports, right? Because there's Poppy for jungle. The main one that comes to mind, there's certainly Gauge supports that need Hexflash, and something like that, just like with the tower bug, can actually have make a big difference. And I know for the Hexflash in particular, it was actually, at least publicly, it was announced pretty late that this was happening. And I can just imagine myself being a jungler during the week, spamming Poppy in scrims. And if I get a message that late, like the day before we play or whatever, that Poppy is then banned, I'm gonna be like, oh no, like I actually wasted an entire week of practice, and now what on earth is gonna happen, right? So I think it's just it's all about timing, right? And with any of these things, I'm just praying that the teams were actually told as early as possible, because something relatively small. Actually, it's not small. Something like this can make such a big difference for those, weekly LEC, LCS, LCK, LPL games, whatever.
Moving on from, or moving away from bugs and into reworks, Udyr recently got his rework announced. We've had a look at it. Any thoughts? Should I become an Udyr main? I'm gonna say the Sivir maining right now. This is peak. This is my time.
Oh, Sivir was
Yeah,
just
it's-
nerfed though. That's unfortunate.
Oh, it's still playing her. People can't stop me.
What were you saying?
yeah,
With it?
I think the worst thing about Udyr is they didn't keep the names of his stances. Like, I don't care if
Mm.
it's now Boar stance, but I can't even remember what they changed the name to. It's such a bad name now.
I'm
One
really
second, let
upset
me
by his
find it.
haircut. I'm gonna be honest.
His haircut and his neck. Like he's like this. It's like it's not a wild man to me, you know? Yeah, so his Q is now Wilding Claw. His W is Iron Mantle. Just call it Turtle Stance, man. Like, the dude puts a turtle shield on him. Like, he's a turtle. Call it Turtle Stance. Ram Jam? You could, instead of Blaze, who wants to call something Blazing Stampede? This could be Ram Man. Just like, you could just be Turtle Man, Ram Man, Bird Man. Could be great names.
I feel like they tried to make him this just from a design perspective. I feel like this is very God of War Ragnarok inspired.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
because
that's
he's
fair.
Freyodian, right? So it's all the Freyodian gods.
Yeah, he's very. This is very Kratos. Like even his how his belt sits and like the body posture. Like they made a strong man, not like the big beefy muscular man that he was. He's still obviously like very muscular, but much more realistic looking in that.
Yeah, I like the fact he's got a bit of a belly. It makes me
Yeah.
feel better about myself.
Listen, strong men have bellies.
True.
That how it be.
Yeah. I think it's cool. I like his awakening abilities. I think that's a fun way of making him more interactive as a champ. Instead of just like pressing an ability once, you get to press it 2 times, so that doubles the APM of any Udyr player in the world. I think that's pretty cool, you know?
Those
The
mechanics.
Sona of jungle.
Well, I think it was about time Udyr got reworked. I'm also sad to see the names of the stances go. I wish they were playing more into that to keep the stances the same, because it's always been what made Udyr so unique and cool in my mind, and seeing that gone is a little bit of a shame, because he's going to be almost an entirely different champion in various ways. But if we look at this old kit, it was incredibly boring in every way possible. So seeing it be a bit more interactive, a bit more mechanical, definitely doesn't hurt. And I'm looking forward to playing him myself for sure.
If that's the case, as far as the next rework champion, if Udyr was boring and not interactive, is Sona next on the rework block then?
I mean, they already did that, right? So I think
I know, but it's still the same.
Actually,
who would I rework?
I know who I would. Well, I'm a jungler. I would rework either Skarner or Shyvana. Actually, when we had to vote for the reworks, I didn't even vote for Udyr. I voted Shyvana, because I think there's so much potential in Shyvana with the flames, the dragon theme, and right now she's really clunky and honestly feels a little bit awkward playing her. But I think a rework Shyvana would both feel and look so cool. I could see so much potential in that.
League has never really done dragon champs well. Like, Asol doesn't really feel like this massive galaxy dragon. Shyvana doesn't really feel like a dragonite. Like, it there definitely feels like there's a big untapped market of like, give me a Smorg, you know, give me someone that really fills your heart with fear, and then all the yordles run away from it. You know, it would be great.
Do you want like a tank dragon then? Asol's actually a really good one for rework.
Yeah, I think the thing with dragons is you could have a bunch of different types, right? And they've done it in TFT. There's a bunch of different dragons there. You could have Shyvana, who's like the elemental drake, and she can breathe fire or ice or poison. And then you have a tank dragon who's all about like Ornn, but a bit more dragony, and his gank is like a Galio ultimate across the map or something, or her gank or their gank. I don't want to gender this dragon. It's gank, yeah. But yeah, I think there's so many cool things you can do with dragons. But talking about reworks, I think Shyvana's up there. I wonder if Elise, like maybe she just needs a buff, but I don't see enough of her, and I really like what she can be as a champion.
I think her play style is really fun though, so I agree with you.
Yeah,
I
maybe
think
she doesn't need a rework.
buff.
She just needs a buff. Because I think I love the spider. I love the dropping of turret aggro. I love the skill expression of you need to do things in the early game, otherwise you like fall behind and you're not really as much of a champion. I was also thinking about Cho'Gath, mostly because I love parts of his kit. I think his ultimate is really cool, but then the rest of his kit I think is just a bit meh. Like he's got a cool knock-up, but then his E is like, and his W is like,
Do that sound again?
Yeah. So like I think that's a bit Udyr, right? Like Udyr, there's parts of his kit I loved, and now I think they've they've enhanced those and they've added some new stuff. Maybe do that with Cho'Gath. Keep his ultimate, find a way to work around his knock-up a little bit so it's a little bit more fun, and then add something else in there that makes me feel more Void Monster than here are some spikes, you know?
I think Malzahar. I'd like to see.
That's a good one. So yeah.
Yeah, because right now his playstyle is just so you're 2 buttons. You walk up to the wave, you throw down your space herpes, you walk away, you walk back up, you press R. That's it.
Yeah.
Maybe make
and
it
if you
skill
Kadriel, you
shot.
press R again.
Make it so Kadriel misses even more Malzahars.
You know,
Okay, guys. Let us know who maybe you think should be reworked. I promise that we'll read them very seriously. But that is it for us on Recall. Broxah Medic, wave at the camera and smile. Reminder, we will be back next episode to talk about everything that went down into the playoffs. Until then, the March for World continues, and we'll see you on the other side.